Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I've been doing my best to utilize AI to find all the needles in all the haystacks across the internet to find the things that are relevant to this channel. We're mostly focused on the second coming. And church news is one of those haystacks. And I have found some surprising things in church news, including it was here where I first found out about the city of Seth in Missouri. I had no idea that there was going to be a fourth temple when the saints were first here. Well, you can use AI to search websites, and in the case of church news, they have articles that go back pretty far. And this one is from 1997. There's something really interesting that's said here. So it mentions something interesting. We're going to look at some other stuff. But this article is called Prepare for the Second Coming. Listening to the prophet will help church members prepare for, quote unquote, Christ Advent in Glory, said Richard Cowan during the Church Educational System Symposium on the Doctrine and Covenants, January 25th. Quote, as we see the time of the second coming getting closer, there will be some remarkable events taking place, said Brother Cowan, a BYU faculty member of church history and doctrine. Brother Cowan called Doctrine and Covenants 45, quote, perhaps the single best overview of the last days anywhere in the standard works, end quote. He asked the audience to base their conclusions about the topic on authoritative sources. I totally agree. I think there is room for pondering and speculation, but then sometimes we cross that line into teaching our ponderings and speculations as doctrine. So we have to be careful. Bruce R. McConkie talked about the fact that we need to label speculation as such. But even more important than that is sticking to authoritative sources. Okay, continuing. And not to read more into the scriptures about the topic than is really there. Well, in addition to the scriptures, as you guys know, the brethren and general authorities and general officers of the church have expounded on the scriptures. There's a lot that has been said. We are a living church. We have living prophets, and more has been said since the scriptures were written. And so we have to take that into account as well. Brother Cowan said that nobody knows the day or the hour when the Savior will return to the earth. He added, however, that church members can watch for signs and know that the time of the second coming is approaching, just as a mother knows the time she will deliver an unborn child is approaching. Now, that's not new. This is something that's kind of interesting. If we go back to 1997, certainly, yes, there had been plenty of signs of the time by that point. There's that one talk by President Hinckley where he went as far back as Pompeii and the Black Plague and other disasters a long time ago, centuries ago. And he cited those disasters as signs of the times. A lot of times we think it's all for us. It's reserved for us to view in the future. But there's already been so much. But compare 1997 to now, 2026. We've seen so much more since 1997. Back then, back in 1997, the internet was still in its infancy, essentially. We hadn't yet reached that big event that happened in 2001 and the wars that ensued, the huge disasters that took place with earthquakes and tsunamis and so many other things. So if we're looking at this metaphorical woman that is about to deliver a child, I think it's pretty soon. It's much, much sooner than it was back in 1997. But continuing, he noted that even though the time has not yet been revealed, the scriptures tell church members they must prepare for that day. Okay, these next two paragraphs, this is what I really want to focus on in this video. Brother Cowan talked about some of the recent events in Eastern Europe, such as the fall of communist governments in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland, and the Berlin Wall opening up as signs of the times. Okay, again, a lot of times we're biased toward our own time or our own decade that we're living in right now, and we forget what's happened. So for us at this point, we're just like, oh, yawn, that's history, But no, that definitely was a sign of the times. Continuing, these events, he continued, helped usher missionary work into those countries. Quote, this is really what I want to focus on, what he says here. 10 years ago, in 1987, if anyone had asked me when there would be missionaries in the Soviet Union, I would have said, well, perhaps during the Millennium. The point I'm trying to suggest is that these events that we thought would happen someday are here. End quote. And the signs of the times, he continued, are going to get more exciting as time goes. Okay. So before I finish off the rest of what I have highlighted here, I've added this quote to my spreadsheet called Quotes Second Coming. Now, Richard Cowan, at that time, I don't know if he ever became a general authority, but he was not at that time. But I want to keep track of statements like this when people are like, I never thought that this would ever happen, and now that day is here. And so I've added what he said to this spreadsheet, and I've created a new topic. The topic is that day has arrived. So something that you just could not picture happening, and then one day it does. And I think like that, when I think about things like this, if we go to the church website and look at this temple map, if I were to go back to 1997, even though the Soviet Union had fallen, it would have been hard for me to picture a temple in Russia. Now, a temple has not yet been constructed. I think that's all been complicated, to say the least, because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And Russia also blacklisted BYU within the last couple years. I can't remember if it was last year or not, but recently. But the fact remains that, at least when it was announced by President Nelson, it was plausible to have a temple in Russia. And I'm sure that we will still see that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that before the second coming. But a temple in Russia, if you go back maybe to the 80s, it'd be hard to even imagine, I think, a temple in Hong Kong, maybe. But putting Hong Kong aside, President Nelson announced the Shanghai temple. They have this place marker in the center of the country because the exact location is not known yet. So there's not going to be a temple here in Russia and here in China. It just defaults to the center until there's a specific location identified. But then another thing is this temple that's been announced for the United Arab Emirates. I think, was it supposed to be in Abu Dhabi or Dubai? I can't remember. I think it's the Abu Dhabi temple. And then, there's others. Like India. That's another one that would have been hard for me to picture. So I think about that, but then I also think about things like this. I'm still stunned by the fact that the church purchased the Kirtland Temple from Community of Christ in 2024. It still, to me, feels like yesterday when I went there to tour the temple and be there for the eclipse the day after General Conference. That is still fresh on my mind, and that was an incredibly spiritual experience. But my mind is still blown that this happened, because this is something I didn't think would happen until the Millennium. And then just one day, out of the blue, it was announced. There was no forewarning. The only thing that we had was we were looking at Community of Christ financials, and it seemed like, they're going to have to do something if they want to stay afloat. And they could sell the Kirtland Temple. And then they did. But aside from that, there was no other reason to believe that this would happen. And so I think about things like this, of course, because now I live here and these places are always on my mind. This is the the temple site, the temple lot that currently belongs to Church of Christ temple lot. But in addition to the temple lot, in order for the city of Zion, the New Jerusalem, to be built with its 24 temple complex, we would also need the property across the street over there where you have Community of Christ Spiral Temple and the land surrounding this area. I wouldn't be surprised at this point if that's announced this year or next year or sometime in the near future, because it just feels like that's the norm nowadays. There's so many things that I never thought would happen. Look at the Iran war. I felt like that was like always in the background, but I didn't think it would actually happen. And then just one day it did. But the temple lot, Adamant Amen, both the meeting of Adamant Amen, however that plays out, and if not that, like if it's not like a big thing where everybody goes there, the temple that was going to be built at Adamant Amen and will be built in the future. I think about Far West, where we own that land. And I'm sure that whenever the day comes that there's enough members that live around this area, it'll be announced and built. I have no doubt. And then earlier we were talking about the city of Seth, a city that never even got started, but according to Alvin R. Dyer, it was going to be a stake of Zion with a temple. And then I think about this. So Elder Bednar said something similar recently when it comes to, you're looking off into the future, but look at right now. Okay, so this comes from a social media post, July 9th of 2025. And he said, if you're a lifelong member of the church, when you were young, you remember people saying, the day will come when temples dot the earth. Ever heard that? And yeah, I'll go ahead and answer. Yes, I did. That was a part of growing up in the church. And then he says, you're living in it. That's not something down the road. It's right now. Could you have ever even entertained the thought that there would be a temple in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea? Are you kidding me? Or in Elko, Nevada? So think of the day in which we live and the things that we're able to participate in. The Lord is hastening his work, and our job is to not get in the way and mess it up. We don't hasten the work, he does. He is. And then I'll just stop right there. So he, just last year, was calling our attention to this. Do you see what's happening right now? That day that we thought was sometime in the future, that day has arrived. So I've added that as one of the topics for this quote in column G. And then just a year before that, famously, President Nelson, in his Second Coming talk, my dear brothers and sisters, do you see what is happening right before our eyes? I pray that we will not miss the majesty of this moment. The Lord is indeed hastening his work. Why are we building temples at such an unprecedented pace? Why? Because the Lord has instructed us to do so. The blessings of the temple help to gather Israel on both sides of the veil. These blessings also help to prepare a people who will help prepare the world for the second coming of the Lord. So it makes me think of 3rd Nephi. I did a video about this recently, where you have this interesting thing. We know that 3rd Nephi is a foreshadowing of the second coming. And how much of a parallel it is, I don't know. I feel like it's meant to be a very close parallel to how things are going to transpire in the last days. And one of the things is this. I'm just going to read a few verses here. Notice how, like, even after the destruction that just took place, because before 3rd Nephi 11, it talks about the destruction, the storm, and the earthquakes and lightnings and all that. Even after that took place, the Nephites still didn't seem to really fully be aware what was going on. Okay, so think about us right now and everything that we've seen just since I started my channel in 2021. All the changes in the church, the Kirtland Temple, wars that have started since I started my channel, the Russia war, Hamas, Iran, and other things. Okay, you can go back to 2020 if you want. Think about 2020. Okay. And now it came to pass that there were a great multitude gathered together of the people of Nephi round about the temple, which was in the land bountiful. And they were marveling and wondering one with another, and were showing one to another the great and marvelous change that had taken place. You know, I wonder if this is meant to parallel our own time right now. Not so much that there's like a 1 day destruction of everything, but just everything that we've seen, all the signs, all the changes, all the wars, all the disasters. And here we are on my channel and others, and it's brought up in general conference and church news, all the changes, all the wonders that we're seeing as we gather to the stakes of Zion and as we gather to the temple, you see. All right, continuing. And they were also conversing about this Jesus Christ, of whom the sign had been given concerning his death. And it came to pass that while they were thus conversing one with another, let's just point that out. The sign concerning his death. It had literally just happened. And then look what happens. And it came to pass that they were thus conversing one with another. They heard a voice as if it came out of heaven. And they cast their eyes round about, for they understood not the voice which they heard. And it was not a harsh voice, neither was it a loud voice. Excuse me. Nevertheless, and notwithstanding it being a small voice, it did pierce them that did hear to the center, insomuch that there was no part of their frame that it did not cause to quake. Yea, it did pierce them to the very soul, and did cause their hearts to burn. And it came to pass that again they heard the voice, and they understood it not. And again, the third time, they did hear the voice, and did open their ears to hear it, and their eyes were towards the sound thereof, and they did look steadfastly towards heaven, from whence the sound came. And behold, the third time they did understand the voice which they had heard, and it said unto them, Behold my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, in whom I have glorified my name, hear ye him. And it came to pass, as they understood, they cast their eyes up, again towards heaven, and behold, they saw a man descending out of heaven, and he was clothed in a white robe, and he came down and stood in the midst of them, and the eyes of the whole multitude were turned upon him, and they durst not open their mouths even one to another, and wist not what it meant, for they thought it was an angel. They just heard a voice from heaven, and I don't know how this worked, because it's clear that it was a small voice, it pierced them, so it was like the Spirit, but at the same time, they also interpreted it in like a directional way, like as though it was an actual voice coming from the sky. But the voice said, the voice said, Behold my beloved Son. And then a man comes down in white, and they thought it was an angel. So they had the sign of Christ's death. They had the destruction. They hear the voice 3 times, and only on the 3rd time do they realize what it's saying. And then when he actually comes down and he's right in front of them after having been introduced by God the Father, they think that he's an angel. So that's a whole lot, and I'm not condemning them, but that's a whole lot of misunderstanding what's going on in the moment. And maybe there's a lesson in that for us, that as you and me are watching all these signs in the world, wars and signs in the heavens and unusual things taking place in the church and outside the church, and as we get things like this from the church, the Hear Him campaign. I think this was like back in 2020, maybe 2021. But we get things like this. We get unusual talks from someone who shortly thereafter became president of the church. This talk by President Oaks, where he almost did nothing except for quote from the scriptures, the actual words of Christ. It was Christ essentially giving a talk through President Oaks in his own words, except for like the introduction and the close. Again, it may not mean what we hope it means, but it sure feels like Christ getting closer in a way, experiencing Christ in a way that we normally don't. I've never seen a talk like this. I don't know. And now he's president of the church. And it makes me think about the whole church gathering to the Salt Lake Temple, in a sense, if they broadcast the rededication, which I think they will. I wonder if that voice is coming to us. We're seeing the signs of the times. We're seeing the signs of the woman about to give birth. It's really clear that she's in labor. The contractions are happening. It's not, just go rest on the bed. It's like, no, it's time for her to go to the hospital. It is happening. I think that's what's going on. And I think there's a lot of people, maybe not you and me so much, because if you're watching this, you're probably on the same page with me, but I think there's a lot of people ignoring what's going on. They're not hearing him. They're not hearing the still small voice testify that these are the signs he is coming. I'm just think about the Salt Lake Temple in 2020 of all years. The earthquake that caused the angel Moroni on the Salt Lake Temple to drop his trumpet. That is so unlikely. That is so, of all years, it didn't happen in 2021, which still would have been significant. It didn't happen in 2019, which still would have been significant. It happened in 2020 as the shutdown was starting. And just shortly after that, that's just like a few days later, that's when the church shut down all the temples worldwide. Was a few days after that happened. So I don't know. Third Nephi. Again, I created this spreadsheet. I plan on doing more with this, but I was talking with Mindy from Temples of Jesus, and we were talking about how there were multiple appearances of Christ when he came to the Nephites. And each time it was to a larger and larger audience. And I just wonder if like these 3 main days, there were like 3 main days where he appeared to the Nephites. And each day had certain things that were said and certain activities that were done. I just wonder if this corresponds to the appearances to Adam on Ammon, the New Jerusalem, the Jews, and then to the world. And then fourth Nephi, for sure, seems to foreshadow the Millennium. So various appearances of Christ. Third Nephi, they didn't know what was going on exactly until he actually said, "Behold, I am Jesus Christ." And then they finally knew that he had come. I think it's going to have to be the same way for us, unfortunately. And I just wonder how close we actually are. I think that we're really close. Okay, so back to this article that I originally started off with. 10 years ago, in 1987, if anyone had asked me when there would be missionaries in the Soviet Union, I would have said, well, perhaps during the Millennium. The point I'm trying to suggest is that these events that we thought would happen someday are here. And the signs of the times, he continued, are going to get more exciting as time goes on. He said while members can get a general outline of events dealing with the last days from Doctrine and Covenants 45, they can also turn to other scriptures, and then he gives a whole list of scriptures. Quote, "What message can we draw from all of this? We need to be prepared. I think if there's any one single piece of counsel that I would share, that would be follow the prophets. In other words, latter-day revelation from the living prophets is the means by which we know what to do right now to be prepared." I agree. I don't think that we should criticize the prophet, what he says or how he says it. I think that we should listen. It's like what President Nelson said. In fact, maybe I should look that up. Let's go to quotes A through Z, Control F, question mark. Here we go. This is from President Nelson. I haven't updated the format of this cell. I'm still in the process of getting everything on the, in the same format. But this is President Nelson. You can find this in the August 1982 Ensign. Russell M. Nelson, A Study in Obedience. He said, "My experience is that once you stop putting question marks behind the prophet's statements and put exclamation points instead and do it, the blessings just pour. I never ask myself, when does the prophet speak as a prophet and when does he not? My interest has been, how can I be more like him?" And before anyone says, well, the question is how to be like Christ, guess what? The prophet is a disciple of Jesus Christ. In fact, he was chosen by Jesus Christ to lead his church. And so it's not that you're specifically wanting to emulate the prophet. It's because that's an example of a good disciple of Jesus Christ, and you're hoping to become a better follower of Jesus Christ. People always like to play with words. And then the last paragraph, Brother Cowan said, the general authorities have talked to church members time after time about repentance, strengthening families, living closer to the Spirit, and listening to the Spirit. Quote, "Those are the things that we need to do to be prepared," he said. All right, so I'm really happy that I came across this. I just know that there's so much more to find. I just got to keep at it. And if you come across any interesting articles from church news or elsewhere, send them my way. I don't know if I'll ever be done with this project of adding things to my spreadsheet. I don't know what I don't know. What else is out there? But anyway, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.